Skyrim is my favorite RPG of all time. I've enjoyed Skyrim more than I've enjoyed most RPGs that came after it. That includes games like The Witcher 3, Cyberpunk 2077, and even the critically acclaimed Baldur's Gate 3. Wow, so Skyrim must be the best game of all of those for it to be my favorite, right? No, not by a long shot. All of those aforementioned RPGs are objectively superior games than anything Bethesda's ever made. Skyrim is my favorite RPG not because the quality of the game was above the standard even when it came out. Hell, I didn't even play Skyrim at launch. I was too busy being like 6 years old. Yet, I enjoyed Skyrim more than a lot of games that came out during my time. Skyrim was my favorite because it was one of the first RPGs I ever played. I can remember my first time trying to get to High Hrothgar and getting lost because I couldn't figure out how to get to Ivarstead. Then eventually I realized I could just read the road signs and it would point me to the town. To me, that was the Bethesda magic. Bethesda magic. It's interesting. I'm sure you've all probably seen videos about how the Shattered Space DLC isn't looking too good. This is made even worse by the rhetoric and sentiments coming out of Bethesda as it pertains to this DLC. They seem to be completely oblivious to the issues people have with Shattered Space and Starfield as a whole. It reeks of toxic positivity, but that's not what this video is about. A sentiment I heard echoed throughout the discussion surrounding Shattered Space is this idea that Bethesda has declined, lost touch, gotten worse at what they do. And I do get why people say this. The idea that Starfield is the best game BGS has ever made is insulting to everything that came before it, things that people would consider superior. That being said, I think this idea necessitates evaluation. The older Elder Scrolls III Morrowind as a role-playing game has echoes of its more traditional predecessor, the Elder Scrolls I Arena and the Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall. A lot of the complexities from those older titles were simplified while maintaining the spirit of those games. The concern for convenience took a backseat to the RP. You actually had to pay attention when playing or you'd get lost, no ethereal guiding hand showing you the way. This added depth to the exploration as you're not just following a white dotted line. But of course, Bethesda wanted to reach a wider audience. So came the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion. It was a more laid-back, easier to digest RPG. It's also where I think Bethesda started to move away from traditional RP to their new sandbox style of role-playing. This ultimately manifested in the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Even more simplification of certain systems, but in some cases, systems were just completely removed, like spellcrafting. So the idea is Bethesda's gotten worse. And I mean, from a certain viewpoint, definitely. But from another view, Bethesda hasn't really changed a whole lot. There's a reason the phrase classic Bethesda game is a thing. The idea of a large open fantasy or post-apocalyptic world that gives the player unparalleled freedom to go anywhere and be whoever they want to be, isn't that the classic Bethesda game? Well, yeah. You know what's also a part of that classic Bethesda game? Uninteresting side quests, uninteresting main quests, hell, for the most part, just mid-writing. Exploration is usually great, but combat is often just middle of the road relative to when it came out, or in some cases just bad. But these games are still loved. You know, they're greater than the sum of their parts. Starfield was described as a classic Bethesda game, and if you like that, you'd like this. And yeah, not really. Like, a lot of people didn't like Starfield and cited the non-existent exploration. See, exploration was a core part of that classic Bethesda game, and without it, everything just falls apart. So naturally, Bethesda listened, and with Starfield's first DLC, Shattered Space, they went back to their roots, and, well, we all know where that went. See, Shattered Space was a classic Bethesda game. With less content, of course, but for the most part, yeah. But still, people didn't really like it. Why? Well, we gotta look back again. The video game industry is never static. It evolves. Back in the days of the Elder Scrolls 3, 4, and 5, what people expected an RPG to be was what Bethesda was making, more or less. So no one complained. When The Witcher 3 released in 2014, it raised the standards for storytelling and role-playing games, both in terms of main narrative and the side content. These standards were once again met with Cyberpunk 2077, even despite its unacceptable launch. Baldur's Gate 3 then raised the standards for quest design and companions, hailed as a once-in-a-generation game. See, the thing is, Bethesda was still just making classic Bethesda games this entire time. The point I'm making is, Bethesda hasn't necessarily gotten worse, it's just that our standards for what we consider acceptable in AAA RPGs is a lot higher. Bethesda hasn't really moved beyond Skyrim. Now, naturally people are worried about The Elder Scrolls 6. There's this sentiment that Bethesda could never meet the expectations for TES 6 because we expect too much of them. I disagree. I think our expectations are in line with the industry standard. But Bethesda will never meet that standard if they keep making the classic Bethesda game. Their lack of innovation has caused them to grow stagnant, but it's still up in the air whether or not they will bother to evolve beyond the games they currently make. They have this odd sense of pride in their outdated game design, so I honestly don't really see them changing things a whole lot. I think The Elder Scrolls 6 will be the death of Bethesda. It's the last chance they really have. It can't just be another classic Bethesda game. They need to evaluate the competition and try to meet their measure. Honestly, I don't think Bethesda is worthy of The Elder Scrolls anymore. I don't think they have the capacity to realize that world in the way it deserves to be realized. The Elder Scrolls 6 doesn't need to be perfect. The Witcher 3 wasn't perfect, Cyberpunk wasn't perfect, hell, Baldur's Gate 3 wasn't perfect, but they met or exceeded the industry standard. More than anything else, Bethesda needs to improve their storytelling. At times it feels like they're telling stories for children. They need to tackle more mature and complex themes. From there, it's more feasible to make interesting side quests and side stories with branching paths and decisions that actually matter. But maybe I am asking too much of Bethesda. Maybe this is truly beyond them. I've already just accepted this. I have no expectations of them anymore. And while I'd love to be proven wrong, I won't hold my breath. Anyways, like and subscribe, tell me what you thought. Thanks for watching. Have yourself a good night.